Hello, good morning, good afternoon, welcome all. I'm Victoria Chavez, Senior Advisory Services Consultant here at TEC. Thank you for joining us here today for this special webinar on why ERP implementations fail, including 5 case studies. Technology Evaluation Centers is an impartial software advisory firm that helps businesses globally to research, evaluate, and select the best fit enterprise software, helping them to save time, money, and manage risks. Today's webinar is being presented by Tech's co-founder and CTO, Mehdi Aftahi. Thank you, Mehdi. Happy to be here and happy to have you here today. Tech would like to give a special thanks to technowebinars.com for their partnership and their support in making today's webinar happen and possible. Just before we get started, I would like to make a note that we will have a question period post-presentation. At that time, we ask that you please raise your hands and open your mic, and we will get to you in an orderly fashion. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We hope you enjoy the presentation and the discussion. So let's get started. Mehdi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining us and give us your time. I hope this would be an informative session for you all, and if you have any questions, as Victoria mentioned, you can basically pose the questions, and towards the end of the presentation, hopefully we can get through all of them and provide you with the proper answer. So, as Victoria mentioned, our company is an independent advisory firm that helps companies go through the digital transformation projects, and these are mainly ERP projects. Now, ERP projects as a digital transformation project within organization is one of the most critical projects that any company can attempt to, and its failure, it could be one of the costliest mistakes that any company can do. And there are many examples of ERPs that go wrong, the projects that go wrong, and I would say for any successful ERP project, there is at least 5 or 6 that did not achieve their intended goal and the expectations. As a matter of fact, when you're talking to, if you go through the literature, you can see that Gartner, probably one of the most, one of the biggest authorities in this subject, they published a study that says that ERP implementations globally fail 75% of the time. And McKinsey estimates that 70% of all the digital transformation projects fail. So how can you avoid, your company or your organization to become one of those statistics? So it's a very tough balancing act in terms of managing your project, managing the expectations, and going forward. Now, when we are talking about failure, we are not just saying that the companies that go towards that projects, they never go live. They often actually go live, but to us, the definition of a failure or misguided goal is that the project did not finish on time or on budget. And as a matter of fact, most of the projects usually fail to meet their target in terms of the cost, and we can see cost overruns of between 20 to 400% in various cases. So in larger organizations, that number actually tends to be on a higher side. So we can see 100, 200% miscalculations on the budget. And also, time is of a big concern as well in these projects. So if you're planning to get your project off the ground within a year, if that project takes 2 years or 3 years, that is going to cost your organization great amount of headache, and the criticality of the project often means that you're going to lose more money and eventually support of your staff. Another big indication that the project may not actually go on according to the plan, is that the expected improvements that expected to have happened with the new ERP or the new application, the enterprise application, could not be materialized. So, which means that the users are not happy, they're not using the system as it was intended. And in the last slide in here, I will give you some guidelines in terms of how should you put your expectations and what should you expect from an ERP implementation. And also very important is that when we're talking about ERP failures, it doesn't mean that if you go live, everything is good, you're past the hurdle. In many cases, just before go live, everything goes fine, everybody is happy. Even after go live, within a couple of weeks, everything seems to be fine. But as the company starts using the application, and in some cases, several years after the go live, then the failure is actually very recognized, and the companies will start looking at alternatives. We have many examples of companies that come to us and they say, we implemented the software, it went very fine at the beginning. After 2 years, after 3 years, we realized that this is not the software we want, and all the money that they put in that application needs to be now scrapped, and the application has to be scrapped, and they're looking for a new way to go forward. And another piece of information and fact is that the incorrect selection of a solution can contribute to 30%, around 30% longer time to implement, and 3 to 4 times budget. So basically, if you don't select the project, the solution correct at the beginning, it will lead into costlier implementation if you're able to even implement the application. So all of that means that you need to look at the ERP or digital transformation projects as a project where you have to put your resources all the way from the beginning and have a proper plan and strategy in place to go forward. Now, I researched the website, as many of you can, look for cases that ERPs have failed, and I found many different reasons where each of these applications or if each of these projects can fail. What I could actually do is to categorize these into different silos, which are basically could correspond to the different stages of projects. Based on PMBOK, which is the project management authority in terms of managing complex projects, there are 5 stages in any project that you go, and ERP implementation projects are not really an exception to that. So the first step is the initialization or initiation of the project. So when you look at the reasons for how many implementations fail, you can see that things that can be attributed to the initiation phase of the project could be the poor software fit, which means that the application that was chosen wasn't really the right software, which comes back to why did we select this in the first place? And also inaccurate business requirements. So which means that the organizations, when they're going through the process of implementation, they did not even understand their own business requirements and business needs. And Contributing to that also is that the top management commonly, and this is something that we see constantly in our dealings with our clients, whether throughout the project or even before their project starts, is that the top management understanding of the project and the accomplishments or the expectations are misaligned with the rest of the organization and actually people that are going to use the system, and that also contributes greatly to the lack of understanding of the system requirements, because you need to understand your business needs and business goals and what you're trying to achieve to be able to provide or evaluate the system requirements that you need. So these are all part of, when you start thinking about digital transformation or ERP project, you have to start here. And a very, very important, and this is something that comes up even very, very often in the literature about failures, is that choosing the right project leader within your organization, it's the key factor in project. So this is, again, something that you have to do from the get-go. Another factor is choosing the right implementation partner. So we have in our methodology and in any ERP literature that you go for in terms of project management, you will see there are two different teams for implementation, one on the client side, one on the implementation side. And the implementation partner, which is supposed to be often different than the software provider, has to have the right expertise within your organization and within your industry to be able to give you the best practices and know-how. Another big challenge or a big cause of failures is that often from the get-go, companies are focusing on the technology rather than the business outcome. So they look at the ERP project as an IT project and not as a business opportunity or business transformation project. So for that, they often don't define the scope properly for the project, and that leads into underestimating the work, which at the same time is miscalculating everything that goes to the next step. The next step of the project, which is the planning part, really should rely on the initiation phase, which is basically determining what you need to do in order to plan for the implementation, plan for the digital transformation. Now, if you don't do the right thing at the beginning, of course, you're going to have planning issues going forward. So in the planning part, you may have budgetary and funding issues. You may have resource issues. You may have, lack of accountability in terms of making decisions. So you don't have the right people that can make the right decision. And often, because the projects are not defined as the business transformation, companies do not invest in change management. They do not go for making sure that the business people, the business units, understanding the scope of the project and also invest money and time in making sure that the change is accepted and is something that the organization embraces. And as opposed to from the planning part, also very mechanical part of the project management, we can also look at inadequate project planning and governance, which is really picking the right project managers on the implementation side from the client, and also relying on the vendor or the implementation partner to come up with the proper project management scheme and governance. And often we see poor implementation strategy, also some of the causes of um, the problem is in the planning, and something that we always see is the unrealistic implementation timeline. So often we hear from project managers that I need to get this done by next week, by next month, by 2 months or 3 months, but without even understanding the complexity of the work that needs to be done. What happens is that you often that timeline is pushed down to the project team by the management, and now they're trying to squeeze all the work that needs to be done in that really unrealistic often and then very constrained timeline, and that leads into, again, misaligned capacity planning. They would not know how much timing is required to achieve each of the tasks, and often that causes quality issues in terms of overall project delivery. So these are the two real phases in the project where most of the root causes of failure actually are concentrated on. Now, when we go to the next phase, which is the actual execution, there's still a lot of causes that we can actually point to the execution, which is, again, it's a repeat, lack of commitment from the business leadership in the implementation. This shows up again. Now, of course, the nature of this is a little bit different because now you need the commitment from the leadership to basically push the change within the organization. And that often comes from the fact that the management may not have understood the properly the project and what the accomplishments are for the project. And that causes, and another big problem within the execution is that often users are forcing the customization into the implementation partner. So they basically push to make sure that the new system, as much as possible, mimics or is very similar to the old legacy systems they have. Why? Because change is difficult, right? So this is a very, very real problem that often companies fall into, and because, again, you have, if you didn't do the proper planning and initiation within your organization, you will have to give into this kind of demands because the users are going to basically insist on having the functionality that they want. And also, it's, again, that comes back again, the experience in the internal consultant team. This is your team on your side, on your client side, that has to understand and work in parallel with the implementation team to make sure that your project is online and in progressing properly and goes well. Now, another problem could be lack of resources, lack of inexperience, or lack of external consultants. That means that you hired somebody that doesn't understand your business. So it's both ways. And also the ownership of the project. And a big project problem is actually rushing through the implementation, making shortcuts where you need to actually take your time, make sure that data is properly transformed, make sure that the processes are understood. Rushing through the implementation in the execution phase is also a very big issue in many cases that we find. Now, I have some examples that are coming later on, and you can probably pick any of these and contribute to many of those cases. But in terms of the major ones, rushing the timeline, the lack of business requirements, lack of understanding the requirements and system requirements are some of the bigger ones that you have to pay attention to. Now, once you go through the execution, the next phase in any project is monitoring and control. As you can see, there is less and less causes can be contributed to this part because you already have done the damage. If you didn't go through the proper process, there's not much left to do to basically derail the project at this point. Of course, the things that are contributed to the monitoring and control, it could be inadequate testing, inefficient data cleansing, which is again very, very big. I mean, even if you do a lot of things right and you do not validate, you do not do enough validation towards the end when your data is coming into the new system, your project will fail for sure. And also testing is very, very important. And the other part is training. If you have the best system and the users are not well trained or they don't understand how to use the system, that system for sure will fail. So again, that goes back to the change management, that goes back to the training and going forward. So the nature of these issues change as you go towards to the end of the project. When we talk about change management at the beginning, you're talking about process understanding, different ways to do things. But towards the end, you're now looking at training because now you have system in place. You want to make sure that people actually understand how to use the system. You should have passed that, process change mentality way in the past. But often we see by the time that we get to the training, maybe the users, they're questioning, why are we doing it this way? So, which means that the original change management process was not adequately done previously. Then the last step, which is the closure. That's the end of the project. We go live. Now, we can see that even by the time that you go live, in many cases, the ongoing customization can come and haunt this project and cause the scope creep to happen, causes that delays in going live, delays in achieving the end results of the project. And also, we see that even after go live, you still have to invest quite a lot of money and effort in change management to win the hearts and minds of your users in terms of adapting to the new software. And again, even after go live, you still have to invest in employee training and make sure that they understand how to use the system. Otherwise, they enter wrong information. The more inaccurate information there is, the worse the system becomes, and it becomes a nightmare to manage after that. So these are some of the causes of failure that I could find through our experiences with the clients, through going through various literature, but they all kind of goes back to you have to do your planning properly, and you have to spend time and effort in proper requirements gathering and understanding, and do not rush the project. Now, I have some challenges as well for the projects that comes usually at the beginning of the projects. And when people talk about digital transformation, they talk about this. And these are the things that you need to address them right away at the beginning and make sure that everybody on the project team uh, is in line, and you have a clear understanding going forward. So, for example, on the technical issues, you have to understand and put the pros and cons of different technology pieces that you put in place. So whether it's cloud versus on-premise, whether it's RFID versus barcode readers, whether it's a different type of technology that applies to your industry or not, you need to decide that from the get-go and make sure that everybody in the project management team is on board and it's good with that. You also have to budget a lot of you have to budget, not I wouldn't say a lot, but you have to budget on technology staff. So often we see, and I said before that the ERP is not an IT project or shouldn't be seen as IT project, but that doesn't mean that you should not invest in technology staff and your IT team, because eventually those are the guys that are going to deliver and make sure that the system is up and running. And you have to, by budgeting on the staff, we're also talking about investment in their training, investment in bringing them up to speed with the actual technology that you're trying to install and implement. Another key factor is to make sure that all your business people are involved in every technical decision going forward and within the decision process. So you want to get your business people making the critical decision in terms of what kind of technology, what kind of business process you're going for, and invest time and resources to ensure the data quality. So data quality is bringing your old legacy data into the new system, make sure that they are cleansed, there are no duplications, they're not missing information. And often there are gaps between the new system and the old legacy system. So somehow you need to be able to, with the help of the implementation partner, you need to be able to address those gaps and make sure that data flows properly into the new system. Now, there is, as I said before many times, there is a business philosophy change that happens with an IT transformation, digital transformation projects and ERP project. So you need to make sure that from the top level within your organization all the way to the bottom where the actual users or key users are, they are embracing the best practices and making sure that they're ready to do away from their old mentality in terms of doing the way that things used to be, and they have to adopt the new best practices. And also make sure that your industry specific solution is part of the process. So it's good to have, for example, a brand name installed in your organization, but if that brand or that piece of software does not have industry experience, or you can see that there are tons of failures within your industry, so that may not be the right choice. And at the same time, you need to have the right implementation partner that allows you to do that, which is the next item, which is choosing the right software and the implementation team. I would say that most often the implementation team has a bigger role in terms of delivering the project and it has to have a success or failure in the project than the software itself. Of course, software has to have the functionality required, but the implementation team has to be able to actually implement it. So one key piece of advice here is that should not be dazzled by the features that vendors and salespeople are trying to push towards your organization, and you have to make sure that the implementation team has the knowledge of your industry. So again, this is something that no matter how much I talk about it, it's not enough. These are the key questions, key items within the implementations. And again, this is a mind shift issue. So you need to be able to invest in change management. You have to communicate with the management, make sure that the messaging and the change is globally across all departments and includes every end user, including all the end users from all walks within your organization, and they're also involved in the decision-making process. Resource management, something that often can cause problems as well, is that you need to invest and support your implementation team, your internal implementation team here I'm talking about. And again, we're really touching that. So it have realistic budgets and timeline for the project. Now, often we get involved in various projects where when we ask the questions like, what's your budget, what's your timeline, companies come up with very unrealistic expectations in terms of the budget, and even more unrealistic on the timeline. I remember talking to a client a couple of months ago, and they were trying to do a selection of an Oracle implementation and an upgrade to e-business suite that they had, or cloud suite. And then they were saying, like, in a month time, we wanted to be upgraded and go live within a month without even knowing who the implementation partner is. So these kinds of decisions, when it comes from the top management, is really hard to change, and at the same time, they could cause real havoc within the project. And build an internal team within your organization that know the best about the processes. Now, that is a big challenge because those people are actually essential in running your business. So, for example, if you take your best maintenance guy and put them onto the ERP project, then who's going to do his daily work and his daily job? So you need to be able to, set aside some money and proper training in terms of backfilling that job position. So basically, use the best people in the ERP, but at the same time have some backups for them in terms of getting their daily operational challenges done or daily work done. So, which means that it's a balancing act, as I was saying from the get-go, but the balancing act shouldn't be compromising the ERP system, but make sure that you have proper resources to fill in the work that needs to be done for the organization. Project management is also another challenge that you need to really, from the get-go, address, which is you have to phase your project go live. Whether it's going to be a big bang or phased approach, you have to define it from the get-go. Make sure that everybody is on board, understands that you're going to go with one shot or you have different phases. And the phases, you need to also align them with the expectations within the organization. And there is no valid reason to rush through the implementation. the more you rush through it, the more mistakes you're going to have, the more inaccurate process or design you're going to have, the more inaccurate data you will have, and that will come back and haunt you after go live. So even if it's not showing up during the testing or the user acceptance testing, it will definitely show up during the production run. So rushing through implementation is, I would say, very common and often a big cause of headache and loss of revenue and loss of money for the organizations. And also, of course, you have to understand your requirements before even engaging the vendors. So before you talk about the project scope, you have to understand what you want. So it's of course it's key item in there, and that leads into the scope and expectation. So once you have your product, your requirements understood, there you can actually start negotiating with vendors and implementation partners. Otherwise, you're going to be falling into this black box of project management where everything is going to be shifting and everybody is pulling the project in different directions, and additional information is going to be needed, additional changes are going to be needed, and uh, that will cause into a cycle of additional change requests to the project, and it will delay the project, it delay the testing, delay the validation of data, and um, of course the expectation levels are going to be varying from different phases within each iteration that you go through. So we often see that the people say, hey, we thought that we are going to do it like this. Now, why is it changed like that? So that is because you didn't have proper agreement in place, and that is usually by far one of the biggest issues that the organizations have in terms of um, you know project management and problems that comes with it, which is the scope creep, which is everything that we said eventually is going to lead into um, improper scope definition and then change that comes along within the way. Now, this is one of the things that vendors and implementation partners would like to have. The more drawn out project, it means that they're going to make more money. So, uh, of course, they might also be interested in finishing the project, but finishing the project doesn't really make a good financial sense for them. So they will push for those changes. They would push for those scope changes. Sometimes they are correct, but I would say most often it could be avoidable if you did your project planning and initiation process properly. Now, in order for you to be able to manage all of these tasks properly, we have a very you know ideal implementation team hierarchy that often we recommend to our clients, and it works really well. It is. I'm not claiming this is unique to us. Many companies that manage IT projects and ERP projects do the same thing. But I want to highlight the fact that you have two project managers, basically working as peers, working as side by side. No one reports to the other. So you have the project manager on the client side. So the right side here is the client side, and the left side is the implementation and ERP software vendor and implementation team. So you need these two project managers, and you need two executive sponsors on each side, on the client side and on the implementation side. You typically, the executive sponsor on the vendor side, on the implementation side, it comes from the vendor side. So this is an executive sponsor within the vendor solution provider, and the project manager is actually somebody that has the experience in the implementation of the software within the same industry. And each one of these teams have to be able to manage their own resources. So on the implementation side, you have business analysts, functional lead, technical writer, training specialist, and application specialist, and developers, which is basically something that they have to configure the system for you using these resources. On your side, on the client side, it's also very important that you have to, and it's very important to have these two separate identifiable teams. So now there might be some overlaps in there, but you need people on the business side, which are responsible, for example, the different departments, finance, reporting, finance, planning, inventory, purchasing, production, and so on and so forth. You can name it. So these are business people. They understand the business. You can also have, you should also have IT support for each of these areas. So for example, when you're talking about finance, the CFO will understand the business processes, but the IT people that are responsible for finance, they understand where the data is, how the system is working, how the legacy system is configured, and how to get that financial data into the new system. So this is very critical role for the IT. And that's what I was saying, that you need to invest in your IT team. And if you don't have this structure, and often we can see that in the smaller companies, there could be one or two people that manage the entire business spectrum, which is not, there is nothing wrong with that. But what you need to have is that at least have somebody that understand the information and the data. Now, coming to the top part of this hierarchy, you need two bodies here. One is the steering committee, and the other one is the implementation auditors. Now, the steering committee, again, their executive management, the two executive branches of the executive sponsors, they report to the steering committee, and they're responsible for pushing the changes within the organization, also making decisions in terms of the critical steps within the project. Like if there is a budgetary approval or change approval within the business processes, they are the ones that has to push that change through. There is the implementation auditor, which is an independent body that we often propose to oversee the work of the two project managers. Where there is a change, where there is a requirement that needs to be driven, that body is the one that has the authority to approve the change. And the goal for this project team is the success of the project, not to sell, as this project manager here might have as an agenda, or to keep whatever system you have and push for the customization, which is sometimes something that the internal project manager can actually be lenient to, like they can actually incline to do. So our implementation auditor position here is to ensure that where there is a decision to be made by the steering committee, they have enough technical information for them to be able to make that decision. So This project team hierarchy works very, very good because there is an independent body here which resolve any conflict between the two project teams and make sure that the interest of the project is taken care of. Now, having said that, let's look at some of the major ERP failures that have happened. And with the background information that I provided, we can actually see how each of these cases have gone wrong and what could have been done to avert that and to avoid that. So one of the biggest cases ever happened within the ERP realm is the Nike's failure, which basically they lost over $400 million, and on top of that, lost revenue of $100 million, and 20% drop in their stock value. So basically, they were trying to implement a supply and demand forecasting and demand management software within their ERP implementation. And what they did, despite of the the understanding of the company, they went with an unproven technology, which is up to that day wasn't really used or not proven in their industry. And the forecasting model that they used did not fit the Nike's model. And the bad thing is that the Nike's growth projections was way above what the system could handle, and that and together with rushing through the implementation, which we spoke about a lot, they rushed through the implementation to be able to meet their deadlines, and that caused a lot of issues with respect to the data and integration with other systems. And the system has went live with many bugs and issues which was not resolved before going live. So that caused a lot of headache, and it took 5 years for Nike to recover and reconfigure a new system to be able to recover from this loss and recover from this project. Now, luckily, in terms of Nike, they were strong enough to be able to recover from that much of a hit. And what they could have done to avoid this is to basically go with a proven technology and proven business for themselves and take some time in testing and proper integration and training of the users. So the most lessons that needs to be learned from here is, I think, is the rushing through and also selecting the right technology and right software for this. A1 is another case where with an estimated sunk cost of $125 million, after going live, the salespeople found it so difficult to use the system that they stopped selling the company's product, because these are individuals that would sell as representatives of the company. They would sell door to door the Avon's product. They're the biggest direct selling business in the market in the world. So basically, they could not, respond to the demand within the supply chain to be able to fulfill the orders that was coming. The users will not be able to put in the orders properly because they were not trained adequately. And most of the business requirements did not really match the functionality that the software basically was offering. Now, we don't want to name the softwares because that's not the purpose of this meeting or this webinar, but you can apply any of these rules to many tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 vendors. So it doesn't really matter which application there was. You will find failures and success for every single ERP vendor that is out there. They did not. The way that they could actually avoid this failure was by investing in change management, choosing the right software, and matching the functionality to the business model. This is something that I was saying from the beginning of this session, that you need to understand your business requirements and then match the functionality of software for it. And of course, proper training and testing. Now, there are not that many companies that can survive that big of a loss or that big of a hit. But as I said, for every single big case of the ERP system, there are thousands of cases of ERP implementations that gone wrong within 30 to 40, 100% budget overruns. Now, there are some other cases that are much bigger, in some cases much dramatic. For example, the US Air Force, they went through a 7-year and $1 billion investment that went completely wrong, and it basically derailed their projections for their growth and everything else. And this was done by just not correctly managing the expectations. They did not understand, or they misunderstood or misestimated the size and the scope of their data process. As a matter of fact, in the literature, they say they had like 7 different installation of same software, and they wanted to merge all of these into one. And that caused that workload by itself. They misunderstood or miscalculated that, and it caused a massive scope creep at the end, and which again eventually caused by lack of proper resources internally and also on the vendor side. So what could have been done better here? Again, to properly understand the scope, make sure that you know where the business processes are, clearly define the scope, and then start negotiating with the vendors. Now, waste management is another company that has gone through an 18-month implementation cycle. And their goal was to basically have no customization. So they were supposed to be given the key to the software with no customization. And at the end, that didn't materialize. So after years and about between $100 to $200 million per year loss, they basically ended up with enormous many lawsuits between the software vendor, the implementer, and the company itself. And this is all because of the misunderstanding the size and the scope of the project, and also the misalignment of the functionality versus the what the vendor could actually deliver out of the box, and misalignment or miscalculation of the budgets. And again, scope creep, it shows up here again as one of the major causes for this project failure. HP is another example of the total sunk cost of $160 million. And this was a little bit different than the previous two cases that I talked about, because in this case, there were no major issue. There was many small issues. So a huge number of little issues. So it's like death by 1,000 cuts. So basically, there were so many small issues that the IT people, the implementation partner, and the people that were managing the project could not handle all that workload, and the systems within HP could not integrate because of those many small issues and bugs. And eventually, they lost a lot of legacy system data. So, which means that they were basically losing their history, and they could not manage their clients, they could not manage their supply chain, and basically there were lots of project management issues, which led to those small issues. If they would basically be handled properly at the beginning, they could just be not managing, they could not make the project go so bad. So the lessons learned for that one is the managing the risk, and understanding the issues that can derail the project, and also planning and testing properly before going live. So again, with so many small issues, they thought that there are small issues, we're going to go live, we're going to fix it afterwards, this is not a big deal, we can deal with it after. But when they went live, there were these massive number of small issues. They basically caused the whole system to collapse and not be able to be managed. Other cases, I'm not go through too much detail on each one of these, but the theme here is pretty clear: rushing through the time frame of the project for Hershey's. Like they were going, they missed a very critical time of the year for themselves, which is right before the Halloween. And that caused them not to be able to manufacture and produce and ship the products before the Halloween, which costed them over $100 million in sales. And the culprit to blame there is, again, rushed in the project timeframe and inadequate testing before going live, or basically not timing the go live properly. And that caused operational instability and eventually resulted in big losses. And Hershey's stock dipped 8% because of this. Again, big company can manage this big loss, but it's something that you want to be able to avoid if you can. They're still in business, but $100 million at least short, and 8% less value in their company stock value. Revlon, after their mergers with Elizabeth Arden, they did a disastrous rollout, which costed them $64 million in lost sales and $70 million in total loss. For them, the main issue was issues with the functionality. So the functionality that they needed was not supported by the application. And that caused huge problems in manufacturing, which eventually forced them to switch applications and redo the project going forward. Miller Coors is one of the biggest beer manufacturers, brewers, and they went with a request for proposal for an implementer selection after they've selected the vendor. So this is something that we often tell our clients not to do. You should not select your ERP vendor first and then go for the implementation selection. You want to have that leverage over the implementation partner and the vendor by negotiating the deal together. So they went with the software vendor first. Now the clock is ticking for them to pay for the license and everything else. So they went with the wrong choice of implementation partner, and they rushed the rollout to be able to capitalize on the investment they did, which cost them around $53 million of lost revenue and implementation costs, and resulted in multiple lawsuits. So, having said all of this, and these are real cases, and each one of these cases are very well documented online. You can actually find them. I try to put my own analysis on what went wrong reading these cases, and also just wanted to, as one of the last steps within this presentation, I like to draw your attention to some of the biggest challenges or the biggest remedies for not facing these failures to go forward, which is requirements gathering is a must thing. Like before you select your vendor, I'm not saying that once you know what your vendor is, you still have to do requirements gathering. It's useless at that point. You need to do that while you have no commitment to the vendors. You have to understand your requirements. You have to understand the functionality you want. BPM, or business process model, you need to do it at a certain level and in certain areas, which is critical to your business. You need to be able to do it in more detail. You don't need to do 100% build a model that goes through all the details. And something that often comes up is the BPR. When do you do the BPR, or business process reengineering? You need to lead the vendor with the functionality, with the business requirements, and let them basically take your business processes and re-engineer them with the best practices for within their applications. So basically, you want to encourage best practice implementation, and that will give you the business process re-engineering platform for you, which is done by the vendors, and avoid customization as much as possible. So customization, everybody thinks that it's a no-no, but once you start the project, often people will say, oh, there is a little thing here, we can just do it like that, and the vendors encourage you to do it, which means that basically the more you customize, the more you're going to fall into a vicious circle of scope change, and more customization is needed. So the main message, though, is to define the scope before going anywhere, before you talk to the vendors, before you talk to the implementers. You need to define your scope. You need to understand internally, have an agreement internally, understand the outcome of the project, and set realistic timeline and budget. And that is only possible if you understand the scope. So these go hand in hand. So if you miss your scope definition, if you misunderstand or misalign your scope, of course, you're going to have hard time fixing your budget and timeline. And that is how you can avoid the scope creep later on. It's going to take a little bit more time to start. So basically, what my message here is to spend more time in the initiation and planning phase of your project to avoid problems in the execution and later stages within the implementation project. The more time you spend there, and keep in mind that the costs at that stage are much, much lower than the cost during the execution and go live stage. So in the initiation and planning phase, you may be able to do it with 1 or 2 consultants. At the execution, you have at least a team of 10 consultants working on the project. So any change you do is going to affect the bottom line of the project greatly. Now, the last slide, as I promised, is some expectations or some statistics on the level of expectations that you can have by implementing a proper ERP. So these can vary from companies to companies, and depending on the business model or the industry they are in, it could be varying, but it's something that often you can see. Like, for example, when you're talking about reduced inventory waste, you can see by proper implementation of an ERP system, on the low side, you can go 13, or on the high side, 16% of your inventory waste could be reduced. And there are different aspects of the software that can attribute to various aspects of your business, depending on, again, your industry and processes. You can choose any number between, but these are industry facts based on data that we have collected from various projects. So my presentation is done here. So if there are any questions, if there is any additional comments or additional information you need, I'm here to provide that. Victoria?
Thank you so much, Mehdi. What a fantastic presentation. You brought a lot of valuable points, including the challenges, the implementation challenges, as well as who should be on the team and where they lack thereof. We do have a few questions, if that's okay, but I would like to open the floor to anyone who has questions. Simply raise your hand and open your mic and we can contact you. Also, si hablas español y necesitas que puedo traducir la pregunta, sí lo puedo hacer también. Daniel, could you please let me know if anyone has any raised hands? I will start.
Yeah. Yes, we see here. No.
Okay.
Raised hand. Okay, let's ahead with some of the questions. Do you see the questions that I am publishing?
Yes.
Okay.
Mehdi, so many implementation partners talk about their methodologies with some fancy names. How much role these methodologies play, and should it influence selection of implementation partner?
Good question. So the basic rule from my point of view is that how much of that methodology actually applies to your industry, and the implementation partner's ability to provide you with the best practices within your industry. So you can name it very fancy names or no name for the methodology, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, is what they deliver that matters. And you need to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go based on this methodology, and that methodology is aligned with my industry. So many software vendors have different methodologies for different industries. So you have, for example, for utilities, you have the proper utility package. So if the vendor provides that and they have the predefined process for utilities, for manufacturing, for construction, you better use those methodology and make sure that the implementation partner that you select actually has gone through and understand that methodology properly and also be able to deliver that to you. At the end of the day, you need to be able to trust that the process is going to work for you. And personally, I would not try to change or modify the methodology that is proven by the vendors to be working for your industry. So if they come up with those methodology, stay in line with them and try to obey by those methodology from the A to Z, and of course choose the vendor or the implementer that actually has gone through that and you can rely on them. So follow those methodologies as much as possible. That's my comment.
Victoria,
yes.
We have to raise it hand. Okay.
Oh, okay, perfect. Go ahead, Daniel.
Okay, let's go to Fernando Andrade. I'm going to find you here. Raise your hand if you want to ask via mic. Fernando. Okay, Fernando. Okay, Fernando.
Sí, hola, buenos días. Sí, quería, muy interesante toda la presentación. Muchas gracias. Actualmente estamos en una reimplementación. Queremos enviar de ERP, pero en el actual ERP tenemos muchas integraciones con otros sistemas. Y ahorita es, digamos, el temor más grande. ¿Qué recomendaciones nos podrían dar para este caso? Tenemos muchas implementaciones.
Fernando, no sé si te hemos escuchado bien. ¿Podrías repetir la pregunta?
Sí, por favor.
Sí, ¿qué recomendaciones nos podrían dar en este caso que en esta reimplementación tenemos muchas integraciones con otros sistemas?
Integrations. Okay. Mehdi, so the question is that they're currently doing a re-implementation of solutions. What can you recommend in respects to the number of integration points that they have that they need to be able to meet so the different solutions can talk to each other?
Okay, can you ask, like, what do you mean by re-implementation? Like, was there a problem for the first implementation, or they're switching vendors, or they're switching scope, or like, what is the context?
Es que había un cambio del sistema de ERP. ¿Por qué lo tenían que reemplazar ese sistema? ¿Es algo que tenían un problema
Sí,
o qué pasó?
Ya nos quedó pequeño. Entonces estamos migrando a un ERP más grande.
Okay. They exceeded that solution and they needed to go to a much larger ERP solution, and so now they're facing issue, or they want recommendations on how you would integrate those different other solutions with the ERP.
Okay, so the way that we approach this kind of projects is that we often say you need to evaluate your enterprise architecture landscape. So be able to see from your current systems in place and current processes in place, which are the ones that are going to be moved on to the future, which are the ones that are going to be replaced by the new ERP solution. So that gives you a new architecture for your organization. So within that new architecture, you can then determine the systems that are going to be part of the future, or they are the part of the past and they're going to be decommissioned and put aside. So the ones that you're going to be putting aside, you need to capture the data and bring it into your new ERP system. The one that you want to keep, then you need to be able to define the integration points or what kind of data you need from them. So that can only be done by understanding the entire scope of your organization's operation with the current systems and the scope of the new application in place. So that way we can then determine where those integration points are. And it is very critical. Often you see companies go through this process without understanding the entire all the systems they have in place. And at the end of the project, they figure out, oh, there is a new system that we didn't find. And now the integration could actually be a challenge. So if you're not too far down the road in your implementation, my recommendation is to do that inventory of your systems and processes, which we call enterprise architecture. So you need to define your enterprise architecture, understand the current situation, and map that to the future enterprise architecture. And then the answer would be really obvious. You're going to see right in front of your face that these systems need to be integrated. Now you can dig deeper and figure out the data points or data integration points. If it's not too late, I would say do that exercise. Even if you started already, you might be able to save a lot of time future in the process by doing that inventory for your systems.
Mm-hmm.
Victoria, we have several questions. Do you see it in the panel? For
Yes.
instance, I don't know, Mija Glabnik. Can you comment whether Agile project methodology is appropriated for SAP S4 implementation? It looks like that SAP is too complex for Agile.
So Mehdi, the question is, can you comment whether Agile project methodologies is appropriate for SAP S4 implementation? Because it looks like SAP is just too complex for Agile.
It really depends on your organization's complexity. Of course, SAP S4HANA, it's a complex application to implement. Again, if the methodology is offered by the vendors and the official implementation partners, I would trust that they would actually be able to do a good job. But it's your job to select the right implementation partner. So don't go with anybody that claims they have the experience within your industry. Do your due diligence in terms of choosing the right partner. Leave the methodology to them. They will, once you select the right implementation partner, you should trust that they will actually do the good job for you. But at the same time, have a good contract, have a good precautionary terms and condition in the contract, so you'll be protected, so they can actually deliver the project. Now, that being said, I don't have a preference in terms of what methodology the vendors or the implementers should choose for your company. It's their job. They should know better. If they want to go agile, so be it. They have to be able to back that claim and deliver. But make sure that you have a good contract to protect your interests.
Thank you, Mehdi. Another comment is, thank you very much for confirming a real problem out there. Business community would be happy if a ERP provider offer a real business solution to deploy ERP right in a sustainable manner and maximize ERP utilization and ROI and reduce TCO. There is a question here, Mehdi. We have started our ERP implementation and we're in the current environment discussions with our implementation vendor. At what stage should we introduce our change management?
From the day one of the project, I would say the sooner you start your change management, the better it is. So it doesn't mean that you have to spend a lot of money or effort from the get-go, but change management should always be on the agenda. So when I was talking about requirements gathering in this session, that is part of change management. That is to educate your users by teaching them the new ways of doing things, the best practices. So you can start as early as possible, and it's never going to hurt. The later you start that process, the chances are that you are alienating your users. Why? For example, if you already selected your implementation partner, already you selected the vendor or the software, the users may say, hey, why are we now being pushed this solution to us without being able to, contribute to that decision? So the sooner you start, the better it is. And keep in mind, as I said, it doesn't have to necessarily cost you money. It's all to do with communication. It's to do with listening to people. It's to be able to train and educate your staff, your users with proper information, and also making sure that they are part of the decision. So the more they're involved, the more they embrace the outcome. The more you push the results towards them, they will reject it. Even if it's a good thing, they will, because it's alien to them. They don't understand it. So my recommendation is, if you haven't done so, do it today. So start a communication plan, start the change management plan, and go about doing it. Often companies that or bigger organization, they have a change management project leader. So within the ERP group, they assign one person that is in charge of managing the tasks that are related to change management. It really depends on how big your organization is, of course. So that person is responsible for arranging seminar, webinars, training sessions, even sometimes activities that could be treated as fun activities, but with the goal of bringing people together from different departments to be able to exchange ideas and to be able to integrate their processes better later on. Now, one big challenge of, if you're going from a organization that have different silos of departments and applications into an ERP, is that now the different departments have visibility into each other's processes, and that could actually be a big problem for many organizations, and in terms of a challenge. So departments may not be happy to share the information with adjacent departments. So by arranging some change management activities, team building, and understanding the impact of that sharing of information can bring benefits to both departments, we can actually avoid some of the problems down the road. So I talk too much about it, but the right thing to do is to start it right away. From
Thank
the
you.
moment you know.
Thank you, Mehdi. Another yes,
yes, we have a raised hand. Okay.
Go ahead.
Eduardo.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation, and the information just confirmed the big problem.
We don't hear you, Eduardo.
Sorry?
We don't
very
hear you.
Far. It's very distant.
Oh, you don't hear You don't hear me? It's strange. Oh, unmuted. Do you hear me?
Yes, you just sound very far away.
Okay, but can you still listen to me?
Go ahead.
Okay, the question is, how do a company know if it's fit before engage in ERP?
How does the company know what? I'm sorry?
How fit it is before engage in ERP to avoid all the problems of the implementation wrong?
How do you know if the ERP fits before engaging
No,
for
if the company is fit.
which company? For the implementation partner?
If I understood the question correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that how do you know if the company is fit in terms of the maturity to be able to handle the new ERP? Is that the question?
How fit the company is, if the company is ready.
How do
Okay.
companies know how fit
yeah.
they are before engaging in an ERP? And how do you know if the ERP partner has the bandwidth to help a company deploy ERP right?
Yeah, so there are many, ways to determine that. So the first step, again, is to engage your users. I don't want to sound salesy here, but we offer a service that allows you to determine how far your processes are from the best practice. At the same time, determine your internal, users, communities' ability to adjust and adapt to new technologies, and also the ability to change. So we do that assessment, and that's part of again in the beginning of change management. So before even engaging or before even starting a new ERP project, you can see if your organization needs some training or change in terms of the structure, or change in the management structure, or the hierarchical structure of the organization, to be able to handle the changes that are coming from the ERP. So it is a very critical question, and you need to be able to say, okay, our organization is mature and mature enough or fit enough to be able to handle ERP, but I wouldn't waste too much time on that, because if you do the change management properly within the start of the project, you can bring the level of the people up to the par with your ERP process. So basically, you start at a certain level, and if you determine that there are certain departments or certain people within the organization that needs extra training, within the process of selection and evaluation, you can bring them up to speed. But again, I wouldn't say because your company is not fit, don't even do it, because eventually you have to go through that. The less fit they are, that means that they're far away from best practices you are. So that means that you can benefit more even from a proper ERP implementation.
Thank you, Mehdi. Keeping zero customization is ideal, but not realistic. On an average, how much customization most of successful implementations have done? Is there any benchmark for customization percentage beyond which is too much? Which is too much?
I don't have a number, but from past experience, I would say if you do 5% within or less than 5% of the functionality, it could be acceptable. Anything more than that probably is harmful for the project. Now, keep in mind that the scope of those those customization is also very important. So, for example, you can do a customization to create a report which is at the end of a process, and that should be okay. That shouldn't matter that much because you're not changing really the process flow or the application process. If your customization, now no matter how small it is, it's in a core process and in a core critical functionality of your application, even one of those customizations is too many. So it really depends on where that customization is. But if you really want a number, I would say 5% on non-critical functionality is acceptable, which means that you can afford losing that customization and your life is not going to be changed. Your company operation is not jeopardized. But if you do the customization in a core process, then I would say avoid that customization at any cost.
Thank you, Mehdi. What role does consulting companies like yours provide during implementation to make sure that they will go right?
Okay, so we can provide. I'll go back to my slide here. Within the implementation project, we can actually take the role of this implementation auditor that sits in the middle. We can also play some role in project management and providing some of these IT support and business expertise. So the main role we can play as a consulting company is being this implementation auditor, independent implementation auditor. But we also offer some limited services if you're lacking, for example, some data analysts or some financial, financial business experts in terms of understanding the best practices or, changes. So we can actually help you in that process. Of course, also with the project management, we have some services that we can offer. But even if we do offer project management services, we would like you to have your own project manager which understands the inner workings of your organization. But our main role could be the implementation auditor.
Thank you, Mehdi. I just want to make a comment that Tech does have an enterprise software showcase coming up in Florida. That's going to be in Orlando from April 25th to April 27th. And it's a fantastic opportunity for you to be able to evaluate different solutions. There's going to be some key players there like Epicor, Sage, Oracle, Microsoft, and SAP. It gives you a fantastic opportunity to also interact with these vendors, see what's under the hood. There's scripted demonstrations. You're going to be able to network with your clients, network with other people that are having this in your same industry and having the same kind of challenges that your businesses are having, and be able to, most importantly, learn. Every client that we've ever had attend this event has come back with an immense amount of invaluable information that's really helped them through their evaluation and selection. Little side note, there is a early bird special which happens to end this weekend. So if you want more information on it, please reach out to us here at Tech. Mehdi, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else or if there's any further questions that we have today from the audience.
I'm good.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mehdi, for your time. It was a fantastic presentation. For everyone in the audience, we will be sending you a copy of this recording for your own information. If you have any questions, again, please reach out to us. And thank you again for joining us. Have a great day. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.